You dare to laugh in the face of our declaration of war? The ZX3 Axian ambassador's facial tentacles writhed in barely contained rage, their normally iridescent purple complexion darkening to an almost black shade of indigo. Admiral Sarah Chen couldn't help it, she snorted again, which only made the rest of the human delegation at the Galactic Council chamber break into fresh fits of barely suppressed giggles. She tried to compose herself, she really did, but every time she looked at the absolutely affronted expression on the ambassador's face, complete with those dramatically quivering tentacles, she lost it all over again. "I apologize, Your Excellency," she managed to get out between chuckles, "but you have to understand how this looks from our perspective." The ambassador's secondary eye stalks swiveled in confusion, while the primary ones remained locked on her face in what was probably meant to be an intimidating glare. "Explain." Sarah glanced at her aide, who was desperately trying to maintain a straight face while tapping away at his datapad. "Jenkins, please pull up the relative military strength comparison." "Yes, ma'am." Jenkins' fingers flew across the holographic display, and a moment later the chamber's central projection space lit up with a series of charts and figures. The ZX3 Axian Empire currently maintains a fleet of approximately 2,000 warships, with their most advanced vessels being roughly equivalent to our Phase II destroyers from about 80 years ago. Their ground forces number approximately 10 million personnel, equipped with primarily kinetic and low-yield energy weapons. The ambassador's tentacles puffed up with pride. "Yes, tremble before the might of our glorious military." Sarah pinched the bridge of her nose, trying desperately not to start laughing again. "Jenkins, please continue with the human forces." "Of course." The United Earth Defense Force currently maintains an active fleet of 157,000 warships, with an additional 243,000 in reserve. Our ground forces number approximately 2.5 billion when including reserve personnel and colonial militia. This is not counting automated defense systems, orbital platforms, or our von Neumann constructor fleets. The ambassador's tentacles drooped slightly. But we have the element of surprise this time." Sarah couldn't hold back her laugh. "Your Excellency, we've known about your planned declaration of war for the past 6 months. Your encryption hasn't been updated since we first made contact 200 years ago. We've been reading your military communications like a children's storybook." "Impossible." The ambassador turned to their military attaché, who was starting to look distinctly uncomfortable. "General Zorther, you assured me our codes were unbreakable." The general's throat sacs pulsed nervously. "Well, Your Excellency, you see, we haven't actually had to fight a war in over 3,000 years. Our military budget has been, shall we say, redirected to more pressing matters. Like that lovely new pleasure dome on Zixath Prime. The one with the golden fountains and zero-gravity dance halls." Sarah offered helpfully. "I have to say, the architecture is stunning. Our tourism board has been getting a lot of requests about it." The ambassador's complexion had shifted to a sickly shade of green. You know about that too." "Oh, honey," Sarah said, her tone shifting to something almost maternal, "we know everything. Including the fact that your entire war declaration is just a desperate attempt to distract your population from the fact that your government embezzled nearly 60% of last year's defense budget to fund various personal projects. Like that secret vacation estate on Rylax 7. Lovely choice of location, by the way, the sunsets there are gorgeous." The chamber had gone dead silent. Every alien representative was staring at the increasingly distressed ZX3 Axian delegation with expressions ranging from shock to barely concealed amusement. The ambassador's tentacles had completely deflated, hanging limply around their face like wet noodles. But we are the mighty ZX3 Axian Empire. We once ruled a quarter of the galaxy." "Yes, 3,000 years ago," Sarah agreed patiently. "Back when faster-than-light travel was considered cutting-edge technology, and most species were still figuring out how to build stable fusion reactors. Times have changed, Your Excellency." Jenkins cleared his throat. "Ma'am, if I may, I've just received an update from Fleet Intelligence. It seems the ZX3 Axian Ministry of War has been padding their military numbers. Their actual combat-ready fleet numbers closer to 500 ships, not 2,000, and most of those haven't had a proper maintenance cycle in over a decade. Sarah turned back to the ambassador with an expression of gentle concern. Your Excellency, I'm going to make you an offer, and I strongly suggest you consider it carefully. You can either withdraw your declaration of war right now and we'll pretend this whole embarrassing incident never happened, or, the ambassador's voice had risen to a squeaky whisper. Or we can accept your declaration. In which case, I'm legally required to inform you that the Human Liberation Fleet will arrive in your home system in approximately. She checked her watch, 27 minutes. We launched them the moment we decoded your war declaration 6 months ago. They've just been waiting in hyperspace for the signal. The ambassador's eyes all widened in horror, 27 minutes. But that's impossible. Your ships can't be that fast. Sarah smiled. Oh, that's right, you wouldn't know about our new quantum slip drives, would you? We kept those classified. They're quite impressive. Zero relative time dilation, near instantaneous transit between any 2 points in known space. The papers our scientists published on the underlying principles just won this year's Galactic Science Prize. Though I suppose you missed that announcement, being busy with your war preparations and all. The general had begun slowly backing away from the ambassador. Your Excellency, perhaps we should consider the Admiral's generous offer. But what about our honor? The ambassador wailed. Your honor will still be intact if you choose the sensible option, Sarah said firmly. In fact, I'd be happy to have our diplomatic corps work with your government on a face-saving public statement. Something about a regrettable miscommunication and continuing our long tradition of peaceful cooperation. We can even throw in some technology sharing agreements to help modernize your civilian infrastructure. Lord knows your people could use it. The ambassador's tentacles twitched feebly. And if we refuse? Sarah's expression turned serious for the first time. Then in 26 minutes, make that 25 now, approximately 10,000 human warships will appear in orbit around your homeworld. They will proceed to systematically disable every military installation, government facility, and piece of strategic infrastructure you possess. This will take them approximately 45 minutes, during which time our Marine Corps will deploy to secure your capital and major population centers. By dinner time, your entire empire will be under human administrative control, and you'll be forced to launch a full investigation into your government's corruption and misuse of public funds. She paused. I should mention that our definition of corruption includes that rather impressive collection of blackmail material you've been keeping in your private residence's secure vault. The one you think is unhackable. The ambassador made a sound like a deflating balloon. I should also mention, Sarah continued cheerfully, that all of this is being broadcast live across the galactic network. Your citizens are watching this right now. All of them. We made sure of that. The ambassador's head whipped around to stare at the active broadcast drone floating near the chamber's ceiling. Their tentacles went completely rigid. So, Sarah said, spreading her hands, what's it going to be? Option A, where we all walk away from this pretending it never happened, and your people get some nice infrastructure upgrades. Or option B, where, well, you can probably imagine how that ends. For what it's worth, I'm really hoping you pick option A. The paperwork for option B is an absolute nightmare. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Finally, the ambassador's shoulders slumped in defeat. We withdraw our declaration of war, they mumbled. I'm sorry, could you speak up? Sarah asked innocently. The broadcast drone might not have caught that. We withdraw our declaration of war, the ambassador practically screamed, their tentacles flailing in distress. Wonderful. Sarah beamed. I'm so glad we could resolve this diplomatically. Jenkins, please contact the fleet and tell them to stand down. And get our diplomatic team ready to draft that joint statement. Oh, And have someone from the Corps of Engineers contact the ZX3 Axian Infrastructure Ministry. Let's get started on those upgrades right away. As the chamber erupted into a buzz of conversation, the thoroughly defeated ZX3 Axian delegation was led away by their equally shell-shocked allies. Sarah felt a tug on her sleeve. "Ma'am," Jenkins whispered, "there was never actually a fleet in hyperspace, was there?" Sarah winked at him. "Of course there was, Jenkins. The fact that it was a training exercise practicing rapid deployment procedures that just happened to be taking place near ZX3 Axian space is purely coincidental." Jenkins grinned. "And the quantum slip drives? Oh, those are absolutely real. They just don't work quite as well as I implied. Yet." She straightened her uniform. "Now, I believe we have some infrastructure projects to plan. Let's show them why it's better to have humanity as friends rather than enemies." "Yes, ma'am." Jenkins paused. "Do you think they'll ever try something like this again?" Sarah glanced at the departing ambassador, whose tentacles were still drooping pathetically. "Somehow, I doubt it. But if they do..." She smiled, "Well, we can always use another training exercise." As they left the chamber, Sarah could have sworn she heard one of the other alien delegates mutter, "This is why you don't mess with humans. They'll either kill you with kindness or just kill you. And somehow, the kindness is worse." She couldn't help but smile. Sometimes, the best way to win a war was to make your enemy realize how absolutely ridiculous they were being. And if you could help them save face and improve their society in the process, well, that was just good diplomacy. Besides, she thought, those quantum slip drives would be working perfectly within the year. It was always good to stay ahead of the curve. Just in case. "You did what?" Admiral Sarah Chen stared at the holographic projection of her cousin, Dr. Linda Chen, who was currently sporting the kind of manic grin that usually preceded either a scientific breakthrough or an interstellar incident. "I may have accidentally hired the entire former ZX3 Axian War Council as consultants for our quantum slip drive project," Linda said, not looking remotely apologetic. Sarah pinched the bridge of her nose. "Linda, those are the same people who tried to declare war on US 3 months ago." "Exactly." Linda's grin widened. "And now they're helping us perfect the very technology one used to bluff them into backing down. Isn't it beautifully ironic?" Jenkins, who had been quietly updating reports at his desk, started choking on his coffee. "Let me get this straight," Sarah said slowly. "You hired the military leaders of a civilization that recently attempted to go to war with us to help develop our most advanced propulsion technology." "Well, when you put it like that, it sounds bad," Linda admitted. "But hear me out. First of all, they're absolutely brilliant engineers. Did you know they actually developed theoretical plans for quantum slip technology back during their empire's golden age? They just never had the resources or political will to build it. And you don't see any potential security concerns here?" "Oh, please." Linda waved dismissively. "We've got them under better surveillance than a teenager at their first house party. Besides, they're loving it here. General Zorther especially, turns out he's been sitting on some revolutionary theories about quantum field manipulation for decades. The poor guy nearly cried when I showed him our research facilities." Sarah leaned back in her chair, fighting the urge to laugh. "So let me guess. They're all living in corporate housing, earning Earth-standard salaries, and probably wondering why they ever bothered maintaining that ridiculous military facade in the first place." Actually, Linda's eyes twinkled, General Zorther just bought a house in the suburbs. His tentacles apparently make him amazing at gardening. He's already won 3 local competitions for his exotic flower arrangements. This time, Sarah did laugh. "Please tell me you're joking." "Nope. He's hosting a neighborhood barbecue this weekend. Makes a mean quantum grilled burger, apparently. Something about applying his theoretical physics knowledge to achieving the perfect char. You should come." Jenkins, who had finally recovered from his coughing fit, raised his hand tentatively. "Ma'am, if I may, this actually aligns perfectly with the latest intelligence reports. ZX3 Axian public approval of Earth has skyrocketed since we started those infrastructure upgrades. They're calling it their second golden age." See? Linda beamed. Everyone wins. They get to do real science instead of maintaining a pretend military, we get their brilliant minds helping advance our technology, and General Zorthert gets to show off his prize-winning Relaxian roses. Sarah shook her head, smiling. Only humans would respond to a war declaration by hiring the enemy's military leaders as tech consultants and introducing them to suburban gardening. "Oh, that reminds me," Linda snapped her fingers. "The former ambassador, you remember, the one with the dramatic tentacles? They've become completely obsessed with Earth entertainment. Started a wildly popular video blog reviewing human comedy shows. Their analysis of classical slapstick humor is actually quite insightful. The ambassador is now an Earth media critic, with over 10 million subscribers. Their breakdown of Charlie Chaplin's influence on modern comedy went viral in 3 sectors. Something about their tentacles adding extra emotional emphasis to their reviews." Jenkins was now openly grinning as he pulled up the relevant data. "It's true, ma'am. The ambassador's channel, Tentacles and Takes, is the fastest-growing entertainment review platform in the quadrant. Their recent collaboration with Earth's History Channel on Greatest Military Blunders, A Personal Perspective, was particularly well received." Sarah buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking with suppressed laughter. "So, let me summarize. In just 3 months, we've turned their military leaders into scientific consultants and suburban gardening enthusiasts, and their chief diplomat into a social media influencer. Don't forget the corruption investigation," Jenkins chimed in helpfully. "The public live stream of the Evidence Vault opening got record viewership. I hear they're turning it into a documentary series. Speaking of which," Linda added, "several of the exposed officials have already published tell-all memoirs. The one titled, How Not to Run an Empire, A Cautionary Tale, is topping the galactic bestseller lists." Sarah finally looked up, wiping tears of laughter from eyes. "You know what the funniest part is? This is probably the most effective peacekeeping strategy we've ever implemented. It's hard to maintain hostile intentions when your military leadership is too busy winning gardening competitions and advancing science to plan any invasions." "Exactly." Linda's expression turned slightly more serious. "And the quantum slip drive project is actually progressing faster than expected. Turns out combining Earth's resources with ZX3 Axian theoretical knowledge was exactly what we needed. General Zorther's insights about quantum field manipulation were revolutionary. We might have a working prototype within months instead of years. Just to be clear," Sarah said, "we're building faster-than-light technology with the help of the same people who recently threatened to go to war with us." "Well, technically they're building it with us," Linda corrected. "They're full project partners now. It's amazing what people can accomplish when they stop pretending to be space warriors and embrace their inner science nerds." Jenkins cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we're also seeing a significant uptick in ZX3 Axian youth applying to Earth universities. Apparently, the ambassador's viral video about why I wish I'd studied science instead of threatening war really struck a chord." "Of course it did," Linda said proudly. "Their tentacles got all wibbly when they talked about missed opportunities. Very emotionally compelling." Sarah leaned back in her chair, shaking her head in amazement. "You know, when I threatened them with our supposedly perfect quantum slip drive technology, I never imagined they'd end up helping us actually make it perfect." "That's the beauty of it," Linda exclaimed. "They're not just helping with the technology, they're completely revolutionizing their own society in the process. Did you know they've started a science, not war, education initiative? General Zorther teaches advanced physics to schoolchildren between his gardening sessions. Between this and the infrastructure upgrades," Jenkins added, "the ZX3 Axian Empire is modernizing faster than any civilization in recorded history." Their corruption levels are at an all-time low, public satisfaction is at an all-time high, and their scientific output has increased by 3,000% in just 3 months. And all it took was calling their bluff and then offering them a better alternative, Sarah mused. Though I have to ask, Linda, are you absolutely sure about the security aspects? Linda's expression turned smug. Sarah, darling cousin of mine, do you really think I'd let them anywhere near slip drive technology without precautions? They're brilliant, but they're working on carefully segregated theoretical problems. Besides, her grin turned mischievous, it's hard to harbor hostile intentions when you're up to your tentacles in quantum mechanics and neighborhood bake sales. Neighborhood bake sales? Oh yes. General Zorther's quantum temperature-controlled soufflés are to die for. He's teaching a cooking class next week. Something about applying particle physics to perfect pastry rise times. Sarah burst out laughing again. You know what? This might be the most human solution to interstellar conflict ever. We didn't just beat them, we converted them into suburban scientists with hobbies. Better living through science and gardening, Linda agreed cheerfully. Now, are you coming to the barbecue or not? General Zorther is trying out a new quantum marinade technique, and the ambassador is filming a special episode about Earth grilling traditions. Sarah looked at Jenkins, who shrugged and smiled. It would be good for diplomatic relations, ma'am. Fine, Sarah sighed, still smiling. But if anyone asks, this is officially a military intelligence gathering operation. Of course, Linda winked. We're definitely not going just to try the quantum grilled burgers and see the award-winning garden. Speaking of which, wait until you see what the General did with the anti-gravity water feature. As Linda launched into an enthusiastic description of quantum-enhanced landscape design, Sarah couldn't help but marvel at how things had turned out. 3 months ago, they had faced the threat of war. Now they were attending barbecues hosted by their former enemies and collaborating on revolutionary scientific projects. It was, she reflected, a uniquely human approach to victory. Don't just defeat your enemies, recruit them, rehabilitate them, and then invite them over for quantum grilled burgers and shop talk about faster-than-light travel. Somewhere in the universe, she was sure other civilizations were scratching their heads, or equivalent appendages, trying to figure out how humans had turned a war declaration into a scientific and cultural renaissance. But that was the thing about humans. Sometimes the best way to win wasn't through force or fear, but through coffee breaks, suburban gardens, and the irresistible allure of finally getting to do what you really loved instead of what tradition demanded. And if that meant their former enemies were now their most enthusiastic allies in pushing the boundaries of science while simultaneously revolutionizing intergalactic social media and suburban gardening. Well, that was just another day in humanity's continuing mission to make the galaxy a more interesting place. They want to what? Admiral Sarah Chen's voice hit a pitch she hadn't reached since her academy days. Jenkins, who had long since learned to come prepared for these meetings, silently slid a cup of chamomile tea across her desk. The ZX3 Axian Public Science Coalition has formally requested to declare war on their own government, ma'am. Sarah took a long sip of tea. Jenkins, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't we just spend the last 6 months preventing a war with them? Yes, ma'am, but this is different. Jenkins pulled up the holographic petition. They're calling it a war on scientific stagnation. Apparently, General Zorther's educational outreach program has been a little too effective. The younger generation is demanding better funding for research and development, and they're not happy with the government's response. Sarah pinched the bridge of her nose. Let me guess. The old guard is trying to hold on to power by suppressing the scientific revolution we accidentally started. Got it in one, ma'am. They've been trying to quietly shut down the general's science classes and redirect funding back to the military. But the students aren't having it. They've organized mass protests, sit-ins at government buildings, and now this. He gestured to the petition, which was rapidly accumulating signatures. A war on their own government, Sarah muttered. I suppose we should have seen this coming. You can't give people a taste of real progress and then expect them to go back to the status quo. If I may, ma'am, Jenkins said tentatively, this could be an opportunity for us. If we publicly support the Science Coalition, it would send a strong message to the ZX3 Axian government that we won't tolerate any backsliding on the reforms we've helped implement. Sarah considered this. It's a delicate situation. We don't want to be seen as interfering in their internal affairs. But at the same time, we have a responsibility to protect the progress we've made. She tapped her fingers on the desk, thinking. What's the ambassador's take on all this? Jenkins pulled up another file. They've been surprisingly vocal in their support of the Science Coalition. In fact, they just released a new video about it. It's trending across the galaxy. He played the clip. The ambassador's tentacles were quivering with emotion as they spoke. For too long, our society has been held back by a government that values power over progress, tradition over innovation. But no more. The time has come for a new era, an era of scientific enlightenment, where every ZX3 Axian has the opportunity to reach their full potential. We stand with the brave students and researchers fighting for their right to a brighter future. We stand with the Public Science Coalition. And we call upon our human allies, who have shown us the true power of knowledge, to stand with us too. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Well, that's quite the endorsement. Have they been taking public speaking lessons from Linda? Jenkins chuckled. I believe she did give them some pointers, ma'am. Something about unleashing the power of dramatic tentacle gestures. Sarah shook her head, smiling. Remind me to give my cousin a raise. All right, here's what we're going to do. Schedule a meeting with the ZX3 Axian government representatives. Let them know that while we respect their sovereignty, we strongly urge them to listen to the demands of the Science Coalition. Hint that any attempts to suppress this movement could lead to a re-evaluation of our technology sharing agreements. The quantum carrot and stick approach. I like it. Jenkins made a note on his datapad. And reach out to the ambassador. Tell them we appreciate their support and that we're willing to provide any non-military assistance the coalition may need. Educational resources, scientific equipment, that sort of thing. Maybe a few more of Dr. Chen's patented quantum barbecue grills to keep morale up. Now you're thinking like a diplomat, Jenkins. Sarah grinned. Oh, and see if General Zorther is willing to do a joint press conference with the coalition leaders. Having a former military hero on their side could really boost their credibility. I'll send him an invite, ma'am. I'm sure he'll be thrilled. The last time I spoke with him, he was raving about some new breakthrough in quantum entanglement theory that he couldn't wait to share with his students. Sarah leaned back in her chair, sipping her tea thoughtfully. You know, when we first made contact with the ZX3 Axians all those centuries ago, I never could have imagined that one day we'd be helping them fight a war for scientific progress on their own turf. Just goes to show what a little diplomacy and a lot of technological superiority can achieve, ma'am. Indeed. Sarah raised her cup in a mock toast. To the power of human ingenuity, turning sworn enemies into science fair partners, one quantum grill at a time. Jenkins clinked his own mug of coffee against hers. And to the poor, unsuspecting galaxy that has no idea what it's in for. They both chuckled, but there was a glint of something more serious in Sarah's eye. In all fairness, Jenkins, I'm not sure we know what we're in for either. This Public Science Coalition. I have a feeling they're going to accomplish great things. Greater, perhaps, than even we can imagine. Is that a bad thing, ma'am? Not at all. But it's going to change the game. In ways we can't fully predict. She smiled wryly. I just hope the galaxy is ready for a scientifically enlightened ZX3 Axian Empire. If they're not, I'm sure we can always lend them a few quantum barbecue grills to smooth things over. Sarah laughed. The Chen diplomatic method, patent pending. She finished her tea and stood. Alright, enough speculation. We've got work to do. A war to support, a government to influence, and with any luck. Her eyes sparkled with anticipation. A brave new world to build. Together. Jenkins grinned. Just another day in paradise, ma'am. And as they strode out to shape the future of the universe, one revolutionized civilization at a time, neither of them could quite suppress the thrill of excitement that ran down their spines. Because this, after all, was what humans did best. They changed the game. And they had a hell of a good time doing it. The ZX3 Axian High Council chamber was in an uproar. Representatives from the Old Guard and the Public Science Coalition were shouting over each other, tentacles waving furiously. Order, the High Counselor bellowed, slamming his appendage on the podium. We will have order in this chamber. Gradually, the din subsided. The High Counselor fixed his primary eyes on the leader of the Science Coalition, a young ZX3 Axian named Xylex who had been one of General Zorther's most promising students. Xylex, you and your coalition have made some extraordinary claims. Accusing the government of suppressing scientific progress, stifling innovation, even, he glanced at his datapad, and I quote, holding our society back in the dark ages while the rest of the galaxy leaves us behind. These are serious allegations. Xylex met the High Counselor's gaze unflinchingly. They are not allegations, Counselor. They are facts. Facts that have been carefully documented and presented to this council, only to be ignored or dismissed at every turn. A murmur ran through the chamber. The High Counselor's throat sacs pulsed with irritation. The council has reviewed your evidence and found it to be circumstantial at best, seditious at worst. Your coalition's calls for increased science funding and decreased military spending are naive and dangerous. Need I remind you that we live in a hostile galaxy? A galaxy that is rapidly passing us by. Xylex slammed a tentacle on the railing. While we waste our resources on outdated warships and pointless posturing, other civilizations are unlocking the secrets of the universe. The humans have offered to share their knowledge with us, to help us catch up, but this government is too proud, too stuck in its ways, to accept their help. The humans, the High Counselor spat. Your coalition's admiration for these upstarts borders on treasonous. Have you forgotten how they humiliated us? How they brought our mighty empire to its knees without firing a single shot? They didn't bring us to our knees, Counselor. They lifted us up. They showed us a better way. A way of progress, of cooperation, of using our scientific prowess for the betterment of all ZX3 Axian kind. Xylex's voice rang with passion. It is this council that seeks to drag us back down into the muck of ignorance and stagnation. The chamber erupted again. The High Counselor pounded the podium for order, his facial tentacles writhing with fury. Just then, a chime sounded, indicating an incoming transmission from off-world. The High Counselor jabbed a button, and a hologram of Admiral Sarah Chen appeared in the center of the chamber. Admiral Chen, the High Counselor said stiffly. To what do we owe this unexpected pleasure? High Counselor, Sarah inclined her head politely. Representatives of the ZX3 Axian government. And, her eyes found Xylex, members of the Public Science Coalition. Thank you for receiving my call. Get to the point, Admiral, the High Counselor snapped. We are in the middle of important government business. So I see. Sarah's tone was mild, but there was a glint of steel in her eye. I won't take up too much of your time, then. I simply wanted to convey a message from the United Earth government. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Every eye in the chamber was fixed on her hologram. We have been following the recent developments in your empire with great interest. The rise of the Public Science Coalition, the groundswell of support for scientific progress and educational reform. We find these developments heartening. The High Counselor's tentacles twitched. The internal affairs of the ZX3 Axian Empire are none of Earth's concern. Oh, but I beg to differ, Counselor. You see, when we first made contact with your civilization, we saw great potential. Potential for growth, for change, for a future of mutually beneficial cooperation between our peoples. And in recent months, we have seen that potential begin to blossom. Her gaze hardened. But now, we see forces within your government seeking to stamp out that progress. To silence the voices of innovation and enlightenment. This concerns us greatly. Is that a threat, Admiral? The High Counselor hissed. Not at all, Sarah said smoothly. Merely a reminder. A reminder of the agreement we made when we welcomed you into the galactic community. An agreement to foster the free exchange of ideas, to promote scientific advancement for the good of all, and to leave the ways of ignorance and aggression behind. She let her words hang in the air for a moment. The United Earth Government stands with those who uphold these ideals. We stand with the scientists, the educators, the visionaries who dare to dream of a better tomorrow. And we will not stand idly by while those dreams are crushed beneath the heel of short-sighted tyranny. The chamber was utterly silent. Xylix stared at the human admiral with something like awe. But I have taken enough of your time, Sarah said briskly. I simply ask that as you deliberate on the matters before you, you consider carefully the path you wish to take. The path of stagnation and oppression, or the path of progress and enlightenment. The choice is yours. She smiled. I look forward to seeing which path you choose. Earth out. Her hologram winked out, leaving a stunned council in her wake. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, Xylix raised a tentacle. High Counselor, I move to open an immediate dialogue with the Public Science Coalition to discuss their proposals in detail and draft a plan for implementation. Another representative raised their appendage. Seconded. The High Counselor looked around the chamber, his throat sacs pulsing wildly. But as he saw the determined expressions on the faces around him, the fire of a new resolve burning in their eyes, he seemed to deflate. Very well, he said grudgingly. The motion is carried. Let us begin. And as the council chamber buzzed with a new energy, a sense of purpose and possibility, light years away on Earth, Admiral Sarah Chen leaned back in her chair with a satisfied smile. And that, Jenkins, she said to her aide, is how you fight a war in the 24th century. Jenkins grinned. By making the enemy defeat themselves. By giving the enemy's allies the tools to build a better future. And making it very, very clear which side that future is on. She chuckled softly. I almost feel sorry for the High Counselor. He has no idea what he's unleashed. I don't think any of us do, ma'am. Jenkins hesitated. Do you think they're ready for it? For the kind of change the Science Coalition is pushing for? Sarah considered the question. No, she said at last. But they will be. Because they have something now that they didn't have before. What's that? She smiled. Hope, Jenkins. They have hope. And as someone much wiser than me once said, that's the most powerful weapon of all. Jenkins nodded slowly. Then I guess our work here is done. Oh, I wouldn't say that. Sarah's eyes twinkled. In fact, I rather think it's just beginning. After all. She spread her hands, encompassing the whole of the brilliant, chaotic, endlessly fascinating universe. There's always another civilization to enlighten, another scientific revolution to spark, another quantum souffle to perfect. Jenkins laughed. Sounds like we've got our work cut out for us. That we do, Jenkins. That we do. Sarah grinned. But I wouldn't have it any other way. And with that, the two humans who had accidentally on purpose changed the course of an entire alien empire settled in to watch the fruits of their labors unfold. It was going to be one hell of a show. Years passed. The ZX3 Axian Empire, once a bastion of stagnation and militaristic posturing, had undergone a complete transformation. Under the guidance of the Public Science Coalition and with the enthusiastic support of Earth, it had become a hub of scientific innovation and cultural renaissance. General Zorther, now universally known as Professor Zorther, had won the Galactic Science Council's highest honor for his groundbreaking work in quantum field manipulation. His acceptance speech, delivered via hologram from his lush garden on Earth where he was hosting a charity tea party to raise funds for underprivileged ZX3 Axian students, had moved the audience to tears, and in some cases, to spontaneous flower arranging. The former ambassador, meanwhile, had parlayed their success as a social media influencer into a thriving intergalactic entertainment empire. Their hit show, Cooking Across the Cosmos, featured them visiting different planets and learning local culinary traditions, all while delivering witty commentary and heartfelt lessons about the importance of cultural exchange. The episode where they learned to make traditional human apple pie, with a quantum-enhanced crust, of course, had broken galactic viewership records. And then there was Xylex. The young visionary who had started as a rebel leader had risen to become the youngest High Counselor in ZX3 Axian history. Under their leadership, the Empire had forged new alliances, pioneered incredible technological advancements, and become a shining example of what a society could achieve when it embraced knowledge and cooperation over fear and aggression. On Earth, Admiral Sarah Chen watched these developments with a deep sense of satisfaction. There had been challenges, of course. Pockets of resistance from the old guard, misunderstandings and missteps along the way. But overall, the ZX3 Axian transformation had exceeded even her most optimistic projections. "You know, Jenkins," she said to her ever-faithful aide as they reviewed the latest reports, "I think it's safe to say that Operation Kill Them with Kindness has been a resounding success." Jenkins chuckled. "I still can't believe that's what we officially called it." "Hey, I let Linda name it. You know how she gets when she's on a roll." "Fair point, ma'am." Jenkins hesitated, then asked the question that had been on his mind for years. "Do you think they'll ever realize? The ZX3 Axians, I mean. How much of this was, well, engineered by us?" Sarah considered the question. "Some of them, probably. The smart ones, the ones who pay attention to the bigger picture. But most of them? I think they'll just accept it as the natural course of their societal evolution." And in a way, it was. She leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. "We didn't force this change on them, Jenkins. We just nudged them in the right direction. Gave them the tools and the opportunities to become the best version of themselves. The rest was all them." Jenkins nodded slowly. "Still, it's a bit overwhelming, isn't it? To think that we have that kind of power. To shape the destiny of entire civilizations." "It is," Sarah agreed. "And it's a responsibility we don't take lightly. But I truly believe that this is what humans are meant to do. To be the catalyst for positive change in the universe. To help others reach their full potential, even if they don't always realize that's what we're doing." She smiled. "After all, that's what friends are for." Just then, a chime sounded, indicating an incoming message. Sarah tapped the screen and a holographic Xylex appeared, their facial tentacles arranged in an expression of excitement. "Admiral Chen. I hope I'm not interrupting, but I had to share the news personally. We've done it. The Quantum Slip Drive Mark III is operational." Sarah's eyes widened. "Already? That's fantastic, Xylex. Your team must have been working around the clock." "We have," Xylex admitted, their tentacles drooping slightly with fatigue. "But it was worth it. With this new drive, we can traverse the galaxy in a matter of days. The possibilities for exploration, for scientific discovery, are endless." "I'm thrilled to hear it," Sarah said warmly. "And I know Professor Zorther and the rest of our slip drive team will be eager to study your design. This is a momentous achievement, Xylex. You should be very proud." Xylex's tentacles rippled with pleasure. "Thank you, Admiral. But we never could have done it without Earth's support." Without your guidance and friendship. We owe you so much. Sarah waved a hand dismissively. You don't owe us anything, Xylex. This was a partnership, a collaboration. We all learn from each other. She grinned. Besides, something tells me that in a few years, it'll be humanity racing to keep up with ZX3 Axian innovations. You're just getting started, my friend. Xylex laughed. Well, we did learn from the best. Speaking of which, the High Council wanted me to extend an official invitation. We're hosting a galactic science symposium next month, and we'd be honored if you and your team could attend. Professor Zorther has already agreed to give a keynote address on the societal impact of advanced propulsion systems. We wouldn't miss it for the world, Sarah assured them. Or for the galaxy, as the case may be. After a few more pleasantries, the call ended. Sarah sat back, shaking her head in wonder. Jenkins, do you realize what just happened? The ZX3 Axians, the same species who once threatened to conquer us, just invited us to a galactic science conference as honored guests. The irony is delicious, ma'am. It's more than irony, Jenkins. It's progress. It's what happens when civilizations learn to work together instead of against each other. When they start seeing each other as partners instead of enemies. She smiled softly. And to think, it all started with a misguided declaration of war and a few well-timed quantum barbecues. Jenkins returned her smile. Never underestimate the power of a good barbecue, ma'am. Or a determined human with a plan. Truer words, Jenkins. Truer words. Sarah stood and stretched, feeling a renewed sense of energy and purpose. There was still so much to do, so many civilizations to engage with, so many wonders to discover. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of pure, unbridled optimism. The future was bright. The galaxy was vast and filled with potential. And humanity, in all its brilliant, impossible, indomitable glory, was ready to meet it head-on. One quantum leap at a time. The end.